Good morning and welcome to Football World TV. Sorry, a few early technical issues there, but this is the debate show. My name is Ned Holmes, and this morning I'm joined by my colleague Billy Mulley to discuss what's next for Cardiff City after the sacking of Mark Hudson. How are you doing this morning, Billy?
Yeah, doing well. And yeah, as you mentioned there, Mark Hudson getting the sack. It's a very, very interesting situation. We're just speaking off air there about the direction that they'll take. It's one with many different possibilities and one that's a good topic for discussion at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's been plenty of EFL and Championship sackings this season. Obviously, it's the second time Cardiff have changed manager this season. Dean Whitehead taking interim charge for the time being. Well, as I say, me and Billy are going to sort of get stuck into the sacking itself. What's next for Cardiff, and obviously that name Neil Warnock linked once again, and whether that's a good call for them. But before we do get started, just a reminder, please do like and share this video. Subscribe to Football World TV if you haven't already. That's on YouTube. And do let us know your thoughts in the comments. Are you a Cardiff fan, a fan of another EFL club? Where do you think the Bluebirds should go next? Well, Billy, we'll start, as I said, with Mark Hudson sacked after that draw against Wigan, the late equaliser, which really must sting for him at a bitter end, really. He was appointed in September, stepping up an internal appointment to replace Steve Morrison. There's 18 games in charge, just 4 wins, which is a 22% win ratio. The right call at this point, do you think, to sack him?
Yeah, I think it is. I think you get to this point of the season, you start thinking about the possibility of being part of a relegation scrap, and financially speaking, it could be quite disastrous if Cardiff were to get relegated this season. So it's a right point to really assess what's going on. Of course, I think Mark Hudson has been thrown into this situation. I don't think he's lost too much credibility or that tarnished his legacy as such. But I do think it was the right time to sort of pull the trigger. As you mentioned there, the win rate of 22%. I think they'd they're without a win in the last 8 league games. Goal scoring record was, of course, quite disappointing. They weren't losing games by but they weren't getting battered or anything. The scorelines were very, very tight. Defensively, that they perform well as a unit, and one of the better performing defences in the division, which is quite strange given how everything sort of panned out. But ultimately, you look at the record, you look at sort of the direction from a results perspective they were heading in, and it does. I think it is the right decision to part company, but at the same time, I don't think the issue lies in Mark Hudson. I think fingers have been pointed at higher up at Cardiff, and I think that's probably where the issue has to lie.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on that one. In terms of timing, it being midway through the January transfer window obviously means that whoever does come in should get a chance to at least make a few tweaks to the squad. As you say, that run of no wins since the 5th of November. I think it's 9 games in all competitions. An intriguing one, given that as you said, they've been in games. I think 6 of those were draws. So it's not like that they've been absolutely terrible. They just really lacked a killer blow. And would you say, Billy, it's sort of it's a tough one really for Mark Hudson to take. A club legend like he is, and he's been dealt a bit of a bad hand in that he sort of was given Steve Morrison's squad, and he's sort of not been able to turn things around.
Yeah, and I think it's hard not to feel any sympathy for him. Of course, club legend during his playing career. As I mentioned before, I believe he was sort of thrown into the situation. He didn't really impress too much during his sort of interim period, and I think looking during that time, I think there was some good managerial candidates that were out of work. Rob Edwards, who's gone to Luton now, and Critchley was potentially available as well before he went to QPR. I think exploring one of those options, would have been something to go down. But I guess at the time, Hudson hadn't really hadn't done anything wrong, and he also represented a bit of a cheaper option. So I think that's probably why the hierarchy opted to go in that way. But yeah, as I said before, I don't think he's legacy has been tarnished in any way. Of course, it hasn't gone according to plan, but I think Cardiff fans appreciate the difficulty he's had. There was a lot of changes in the summer that are heading in this new direction. Steve Morrison then saw his time cut short, and Mark Hudson was left to pick up the pieces from that, which is obviously going to be very, very difficult, adding so many new players and changing the direction of the club, playing a more possession-based style of football, which is something that was fairly new to Cardiff City. It's definitely been a very, very difficult situation for him to be in, and whilst we're talking here and saying that it's fair that he has gone, I just don't think too much blame can be placed on him.
Yeah, I think I'd imagine that the majority of Cardiff fans would probably sort of echo your thoughts there, Billy. Looking at Cardiff, as we said, no wins since the 5th of November, 9 games, that is, in all competitions, 6 draws. They sit 21st with 29 points from 27 games, just 3 points above the relegation zone. As you said, a sort of mid-table defensive record, pretty solid in that sense. But the lowest scorers in the Championship, I think it's only 21 goals from those 27 games. Billy, when you look at the Cardiff squad, you consider those statistics in general, and I guess you look at teams like Rotherham, Huddersfield, Wigan, Blackpool. There are signs of positivity for those teams. The likes of Blackpool and Wigan made some pretty strong signings. Rotherham with that big victory, of course. Huddersfield looked much improved against Hull. Are you worried about Cardiff City's position at the moment?
Yeah, I think you have to be. As we mentioned before, the goal scoring record is pretty worrying. And not just the lowest scorers, but they're the lowest scorers by quite some way at this point. Defensively, they've performed well enough as a unit, enough to suggest that they'd be knocking around sort of mid-table. But yeah, there does seem to be this sort of disconnect. They do see a lot of the ball, but they don't carve out too many chances. And when they do carve out these chances, they're not converted. I think someone like Callum O'Dowd has had a decent enough season. He's the one sort of pulling the strings and creating and scoring. But there doesn't seem to be anybody else that's sort of on that kind of wavelength at the moment. I think that's where a lot of the difficulties being found. It's that forward line. It's that chance creation kind of notion that's not really firing like they should. And you sort of look at the 3 teams that are below them at the moment, and as you say, that they've started the recruitment process very well. They'll be licking their lips at Cardiff. They'll be sort of viewing where they are, viewing, the kind of trajectory they're on, and they'll be believing that they can survive and really push on. So yeah, I think they'll be boosted in confidence with that. So I think this, as we've sort of mentioned, this appointment is very big. The direction they take and who is actually tasked with this vacancy is absolutely massive. But yeah, it's a big job for whoever does come in.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you there. Certainly, Wayne Walden, a regular commenter, has been in the comments. He said it's not always the manager in the firing line, but the players should take some of the blame as well. Billy, when you look at this Cardiff squad, do you see a squad that's sort of significantly underperforming? I guess do you see the talent there that a new manager will be able to sort of work with to sort of lead them back up the table?
Yeah, I mean, sort of the comment there and your question there, I think with the players, they have to take somewhat of the responsibility. We've mentioned already that higher up at Cardiff, that there's been fingers pointed there. But you also got to remember how many additions they did make in the summer. It's hard, to make 16 new additions. That's over 60% of your 25-man squad, and then expect them to really come together and almost instantly form good bonds around the team. It's difficult to do that, and sort of you look at the players that have been there for that little bit longer. Well, they haven't been there for that much longer, because you look at likes of, I think it was mentioned on from the Ninian podcast, Perry and G. He's one of the more experienced heads, and he's only been there sort of 18 months. So it's difficult. They don't have too many leaders within the squad that have been there for quite a while, and I think that's quite detrimental to what they're trying to do and to trying to push up the table. And of course, the inexperience from Mark Hudson as well, I think, has been quite telling. So there definitely is a lot of contributing factors to why things have gone as poorly as they've done so far. And as we say, the run from Hudson hasn't been good enough. Fingers have been pointed at the board. Players, they have to take some responsibility. It's sort of that there's a lot of different contributing factors as to why things haven't really panned out the way that Cardiff fans would have hoped.
Yeah, well, let's move on then to talk about some of the potential appointments. It's early days, of course, in the new manager hunt with Hudson only sort of sacked recently. Neil Warnock, obviously the big name, retired, of course. But Wales Online have reported that Cardiff are exploring potentially bringing Warnock out of retirement. Former Cardiff boss as well, of course, had plenty of success there, Billy. You see this as a good hire in sort of short-term stopgap basis?
Yeah, well, it seems that no one's ever going to let Neil Warnock rest. He's always gonna find his way onto lists and onto the betting odds, and of course, as that report suggests, he's definitely in the pecking order. But yeah, I guess when looking at the short-term plan, which will be to avoid relegation, financial, as I mentioned before, the financial cost of relegation to League One, are pivotal to how this appointment goes, I imagine, and I think that's why Neil Warnock has to be considered. Very, very good track record of immediately improving the sort of state of clubs that he's been at. So I think for that reason, definitely needs to be considered. But I think it comes down to this sort of sliding scale of, the tried and tested managers that could see an impact straight away. And then you sort of on the polar opposite side of things, the more project-based managers, that bring their own philosophies and could sort of match what Cardiff want to do in sort of the longer term future. So it's a really difficult decision for the hierarchy to make, because of course that the ultimate objective is somebody to come in and make an immediate impact whilst playing a brand of football that can match what they recruited for in the summer. So I think that's when assessing who's going to be tasked with taking this job, those are the two biggest factors I think that they need to take into account.
Yeah, and on that, the way they recruited in the summer, I guess you wouldn't look at this Cardiff squad really and suggest that it's one that's tailor-made for sort of physical and direct football that we've often seen Neil Warnock play. I think I'd back you there in the sense that it's a difficult one for Cardiff to weigh up. Obviously, on one side, you look at the success that the teams are having by drafting in these sort of new young coaches. You're seeing Schumachers, your Kieran McKennas, your Michael Carricks, but equally you balance it off with there's an element of risk in that, and at this point in the season, that's a big risk to make. So you would think Warnock represents a good short-term option in the sense of, he's not one of those experienced heads that you'd imagine will want to be guaranteed a 2-year contract. He'd probably be happy doing it just until the summer. And for that reason, I think it could make a lot of sense, even though, in the immediate term, it certainly seems like a step in the wrong direction for Cardiff to be making. But it might just be that they have to make that step to then still be in the Championship and be able to make sort of the step forward in the future. But we'll see how that pans out with Warnock. I'm sure there'll be plenty more reporting on that. Well, Billy, Dean Whitehead's been put in interim charge of Cardiff while the search for Mark Hudson's replacement goes on. Obviously, the last two appointments for Cardiff, both internal, in Steve Morris and Mark Hudson. Could you see him getting the job if he impresses enough? And I guess beyond that, should Cardiff, look to avoid another internal appointment given the way the last two have panned out for them? Or is it really, this is a decision that has to be made on a case-by-case basis?
Yeah, I think it's something that has to be made on a case-by-case basis, assessing it after sort of each game. But I think be eager to avoid what they've done in the last sort of two managerial appointments. I don't really see the logic of dismissing somebody then bringing somebody in with a similar kind of profile using the same sort of recruitment process that you've done done previously. Of course, Dean Whitehead's untested. We don't really know too much about him being fully in charge, being number one. So, of course, it's a perfect audition for him. But ultimately, I think that's sort of looking at the last two appointments and how they've sort of eventually played out. I think it's something that they'd be looking to avoid. Again, it comes down to sort of that direction factor. What do they want from the immediate future? And I think whilst Dean Whitehead, could go on and enjoy a very successful managerial career, and this could, be a very good experience for him. I just think where Cardiff are at the moment, the troubles they've had, the sort of coming into the crunch end of the season, there's a lot of factors to put into this, but ultimately, I think this is one they should steer clear of.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there in terms of a young sort of untested manager like that and the risks that come with it. We so often see these caretaker bosses string together, impressive runs of early form, but perhaps don't have the experience and the tools to call upon that when things do go downhill a bit, they can't put them right. And at that point, Cardiff could be in an even more dire situation. Another name, Billy, that's come up is Walsall boss Michael Flynn. Obviously, had plenty success in Wales with Newport County, and his EFL expert Gab Sutton has tipped him as really the best option in his mind. What are your thoughts on Flynn as a potential appointment?
Yeah, I do understand the thought process, and I think that the main takeaway from Gab's report was the galvanisation of the club, the fans, the hierarchy, and I think Michael Flynn's somebody that's had to be in a similar position before and has helped galvanise clubs before. So I do get that aspect of it, but again, I think it comes down to this notion that he's untested at championship level, and when needing immediate results and immediate impact, that's the difficulty with bringing in a League Two manager. I think Michael Flynn's a really good manager, destined for good things. I'd also look at it from his perspective, and whilst it's a championship job, it's a real difficult one to come into, and something that could hinder his immediate development. Of course, started a very, very good project at Walsall, and things are going very, very well. And the grass isn't always greener, and I think that's something that he may find out if he was to take a job like this. But yeah, also there is potential at Cardiff to build something, and if they are able to steer clear of this relegation battle, that I think they do have the core of the squad to go on and do things in this division. It's just at the moment, things have taken a difficult turn. There's sort of blame laid all over the place, and as as much as there are individuals within that Cardiff City squad that could be a big part of their future and go on to do good things with their careers, it's also sort of balancing where the club is at the moment. So yeah, it's an interesting shout. Michael Flynn, I think, definitely does have the ability to go on and manage at championship level, but I don't know if this would represent the best move at this stage.
Fair enough. And moving then on to two more experienced names, Chris Wilder and Dean Smith, obviously, but both come out of jobs this season in the Championship. Among the favourites with the bookies, Billy. So in my mind, anyway, these represent two appointments that would be real coups for Cardiff, particularly in this situation. But I just can't really see a way that either of these two, who were Premier League managers not long ago and were this season managers of teams with playoff aspirations, decide that Cardiff City, in the situation they're in at the moment, is the right place to go. I'm not sure about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think I'll echo what you say. I think slightly ambitious with the job not looking as attractive as it was beforehand. I think if this situation was, earlier on in the campaign and perhaps at the time Mark Hudson was appointed and, you had Dean Smith and Chris Wilder available, I think they'd be more inclined to explore that possibility. But I think given, the fact that they are in this relegation battle and there's 20 odd games left of this season, I think it does represent a risk on their behalf. two managers that obviously didn't with decent enough championship clubs this season, but managers that have proven themselves at the highest level before. So it's hard to assess where they'd where they would step back in their managerial career. But I do think this would be sort of a risk that could damage their reputations and something that they might be looking to avoid. And whilst I think that they're managers that could have an immediate impact, whilst also, coming with a philosophy that the Cardiff hierarchy would look at favourably, I think it does represent too big of a risk in their own managerial careers to take this job. Sorry.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there, and also that just the factor that we've seen so many, I guess, sackings and hirings in the Championship this season that as the end of the season approaches, you think the likes of Wilder and Smith, will know that if they're patient enough, those opportunities are going to come around, and likely, in the summer at a club where they're going to get a full pre-season and a transfer window to build their squad. So, as you say, a big risk for them to sort of step into a situation like the one at Cardiff at the moment. Well, just two final names that are also sort of on the bookies list, Billy. These two at sort of at the other end of the scale in terms of experience, and that's Liam Richardson and Liam Manning. Obviously, both available. Richardson sacked by Wigan earlier this season, and Manning more recently sacked by MK Dons. Both managers that have had sort of decent success in League One. Well, obviously Richardson kept Wigan up and then took Wigan up to the Championship last season, and Manning took MK Dons close before the sort of the underperformance this season after losing the likes of Darling and Twine. Either of those names to you, Billy, stand out like a good option. I think the Richardson one seems a safer bet to me, given the struggles that Manning's had this year.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because in my eyes, I think Richardson would be slightly higher than the Manning in the pecking order. I think that albeit limited experience in the Championship will sort of put him in better stead to take on a job like this. I think he sort of like Steve Morrison, harshly sacked, and that might be something that would deter him from the project at Cardiff. That there is this tendency to pull the trigger a little quickly. So yeah, I think Liam Manning as well. He seems to be dropping down in terms of the odds. He seems to be one that a lot of people are betting on. I do like Liam Manning. I do think he's got a good career ahead of him. Still just 37 years of age. I still think there's many good years to come from him. Of course, MK Dons really has struggled this season. I think losing key individuals and sort of going down a more youthful route to recruit, it didn't really bode well for them. But ultimately, I think he's a manager that could go on to really good things. I just think the job at Cardiff at the moment doesn't really suit what their next job should be. I think that they're managers that should go somewhere a little bit more secure. I think the job might be a bit too difficult for them, sort of immediately speaking. But yeah, two managers that I do expect to go on enjoy good managerial careers. It's just I think that the Cardiff job's a difficult one, and I think that's sort of the motto of this. It's a real difficult one to assess and to put forward different managers because there's you don't really know what the Cardiff board want at the moment and don't know what they've got planned.
Yeah, certainly. I think these two, Richardson and Manning, for me, maybe represent sort of better options if Cardiff board we're going to go to them and say sort of, look, we know it's a difficult situation at Cardiff at the moment, but even if you do go down, you're going to have our backing to sort of take the club back up. In which case, given their success in the past, I think they both represent really good options there. But as you say, Cardiff, I guess, starting to get a bit of a reputation as a club that are fairly trigger happy. This season, particularly, we've seen that with obviously Morrison first and now Hudson gone, and you wonder whether people like Liam Richardson, Liam Manning, who I guess their stock's taken a bit of a hit after getting sacked from their respective clubs, but are still sort of certainly seen as coaches on the rise, as you say, whether that might be a situation in Cardiff that they'd rather steer clear of. for the moment and be a little more patient. We're nearly sort of toward the end of the show then, Billy. Anyone else for you in terms of a coach that Cardiff could look to bring in?
I've got two names here that, you know, I'm not massively confident in, but I do think in the context of who has been touted already, I think like Darryl Clark and Gareth Ainsworth are two managers that might not, you know, be the most attractive of appointments, but two managers that have proven they can overachieve, they can get results when not too many people are expecting them to, and I think Ainsworth is one that's been doing it for years at Wycombe consistently, you know, just exceeding expectations. And I think that's something that will need to be looked into, because they need, I think the expectation now is Cardiff will continue this slump. So I think they do need somebody that could perhaps immediately sort things out. And if that's the approach they go, if the Cardiff board, wants somebody to come in that will immediately make a positive impact, I think Ainsworth could do that. Another name I did put down was Mark Warburton. Again, I don't know if he would be interested in this kind of role, but I think he's somebody that meets the two criteria I set out at the start, that he could make an immediate impact. He's somebody that could get results and steer them clear of this relegation battle. But I think he's also someone that could meet the stylistic demands of what I believe Cardiff will want. He's somebody that could get the most out of, you know, the 16 signings that were recruited to play a certain style of football. And I think that's something that has to come into their thinking. And if somebody like Warburton was interested, I think that would be a good way to go.
Yeah, certainly. We talked, Billy, a lot about the Cardiff board and trying to work out, you know, in their minds what they want. Just before we go, then I'm going to put you in the position as a sort of, you know, the one pulling the trigger on the Cardiff board. You don't have to say, you know, a name in particular, but I guess from your perspective, where do you think that the best sort of course of action next for Cardiff is? Is it a sort of more experienced pair of hands, short term? Is it a project builder, a motivating coach? If you're in that position, making that hire, I guess what sort of person are you looking to bring into the hot seat?
Yeah, as we've mentioned, it is definitely a very, very difficult decision to make. He's really those sort of two polar opposite sides of the spectrum. Do you go tried and tested, i.e. Neil Warnock, or do you go, you know, somewhere in the middle, or do you go to someone like Liam Manning and give them this project and sort of, you know, focus on the long term? And I think, copping out a little bit, I'd go somewhere in the middle. I think going in the middle is something that's likely to be a little ambitious, i.e. Mark Warburton or Chris Wilder. But I guess if you are going to be ambitious, the worst thing that will happen is they reject it and you move on in your search. But I think, in my eyes, Mark Warburton would be a real good addition. I think there's more of a chance that he would step into this role than a Wilder. So yeah, I think Warburton would be the one I turn to, but whether he would like to take on a challenge like this remains to be seen.
Well, the Cardiff new manager hunt certainly going to be an interesting one to keep an eye on, and we'll see whether the Bluebirds do follow Billy's suggestion and look for Mark Warburton, who I believe is one on David Moyes' staff at West Ham at the moment. But that's everything from us on Football League World TV today. But do look out for more EFL shows across the week. You know, there'll be some club focused ones, and I'm sure you'll have our chief editor Sam Rourke on the EFL transfer zone as well. That just leaves me to say thanks, Billy, and thanks everyone for watching.